Have you ever felt?
Are you listening? Damn. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I want to introduce everyone to the next episode of The Critics and the reason we are here today. But first, I want to start out with a one word open for all the panelists that I have today. I have Adam. Hey, Adam, how you doing today?
Hey, how's it going, Vinay?
Good. Courtney, how about yourself?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
And Tina, how about yourself?
Fantastic, thank you.
Good. So I do that just because we make sure we can hear everyone joining us today. So the way I usually like to start out with is a one word open from everyone. But I want to give you a quick story as to what the critics is all about. And I'd like to hear from, get our panelists to join in here. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about a story. And that is about myself and why we started the critics. A number of years ago, I was running a company, about 20 years ago. I was running a company where I had people distributed across the world. AOL Instant Messenger was the only way I could talk with people. I couldn't even make phone calls back then. I had to schedule those phone calls because they were 12 hours ahead. And I realized that trying to get my stuff done the way I needed to for my business was a really, really difficult thing to do, especially when I could never just walk over and say, hey, Jack, how are you doing? So there's something I'd like you to do a little different. I had to manage these people remotely, 20 years where I had to use instant messenger. So how could I get them to start doing what was in the best interest of the company, but get them to change their behaviors? That was a really hard learning curve. Because if I started to be a little too harsh, they may not show up tomorrow, and there's no way I could go knock on the door and say, hey, how come you didn't show up to work today? They were just gone. And that started my whole journey in trying to figure out how to be a better leader, where I kept them engaged and interested in the role, but at the same time, open to feedback and open to leveling up themselves. So that's the foundation for this podcast, this panel discussion that we're going to have here. But I want to start with a little bit with everyone and just get a one-word check-in. Courtney, how about yourself? We'll start with you. Give me one word. How you feeling today?
I would say I'm feeling energized. I just got back from a little vacation, so I'm excited, but more so, I'm even more excited to spend some time with you and Tina and Adam and learn a little bit more and get some insight from everyone on this panel.
Yeah, so I did a podcast with Courtney a number of months ago now, and she's running a really successful pest control company up in the Northeast. And a lot of it has been around culture and development of the culture and being very intentional in that culture, which I like to believe is what has led to all of your success. Would you say that's a fair statement, Courtney?
I think so. I think especially this day and age, culture is so important to businesses and to the hiring climate right now that we're experiencing. I think that culture is really the top of the list of what people are looking for when they're considering making a change.
Absolutely. I think it's key. Yes, I heard this quote that I was reminded of. Culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? You can have the best strategy in the world, but if you've got the right culture, that strategy always comes together anyway.
Absolutely.
Adam. Adam's out on the West Coast. Thanks for joining in. Adam and I did a podcast a number of months ago where he started talking about this. Adam, I'm going to kind of do a little bit of paraphrasing here. You have this desire to kind of lift others around you and kind of lift them up to the next role, up to the next level for themselves. Because when you do that, it kind of lifts you. Sort of the whole idea of a rising tide lifts all ships. Is that a fair way to characterize that, Adam?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel like, we're in the day and age where, at least in my generation as well, where, everybody's kind of, I feel like, always looking for that next best thing. Right. And so if you can kind of empower people and enable them at the same time and help them to be successful, then I mean, if one person's successful and if you can make everybody else successful, then the whole, shabam is successful. And so, kind of to Courtney's thing about culture, I think culture is so important, but it's also, I've been with this company for 2 years and a year and a half of it has been COVID, right? And so culture is very challenging during COVID because you've had to go to this entire remote status, right? So we've had to evolve and pivot at the same time. And so maintaining that culture is even more challenging right now.
And I forgot, I was supposed to do my one word check in. So, Adam, give me one word for how you're feeling today.
Oh, yay.
I like it. Tina, so I also did a podcast with Tina a number of months ago, and we talked about this idea of executive leadership and how I'll talk about myself first. My ego has been the biggest challenge to my growth many, many times over. It continues to be a challenge. But then it's also coupled with these self-limiting beliefs. I don't know if I can because I haven't seen it somewhere before. And those two things together can sabotage the best laid plans. And Tina started to talk through our episode and how you can start to walk yourself through, and start to eliminate some of those things so you can really punch through to the other side. Tina, give me your one word first. How you feeling? And did I characterize that properly?
You did, absolutely. And I'm with Courtney. I feel very energized today. As I was saying at the beginning, it's freezing here, so you have no choice when it's this cold. You've just got to keep moving.
Well, I do want to make mention, hey, we already have some comments that have popped into the window. This is an open dialogue. Throughout the course of this, I would ask anybody who's listening in, please chime in, ask comments, say, I don't understand, I don't believe, foul, I don't think what you're saying is right. Let's see if we can get to the heart of it here, because for me, as we all move through this journey of becoming better leaders, it is all about understanding. So ask the questions. I'm sure if you're thinking it, there's probably 15 other people who are also thinking the same thing at the same time. So I would ask that anybody who's listening in online, please just tell us where you're connecting from. I'd love to see that. And throughout the course of this, if you see something that Tina, Adam, or Courtney says that you agree with or disagree, feel free to chime in. I'd love to see that as well. So first, start out with telling us where you're connecting from, anybody who's listening online. Next thing I want to do here is start to talk about leadership. I mean, Adam, you talked a little bit about this idea of last, 19 some odd months. COVID has changed a lot of what the normal was before and what the normal is today. It has changed. Maybe I'll start with you, Adam. Give me a sense of how do you think leadership has changed in your estimation over the course of those last 19 months? What is required today that wasn't required yesterday or the day before?
Yeah, I mean, I read an article, I think a few months ago where they talked about the fact that, we're moving in that direction where if you can't hire remote employees, then you're going to become a dinosaur, right? Because you're going to get to that point where people, how do I say this? COVID has made it to where people actually want to work, right? They're scared of everything. Some are, some aren't, right? So there's that whole fear that's enacting on them. But I mean, as far as the leadership aspect, at least I know, Courtney, you're in pest control as well. And so, we have 9 branches. So we have 9 branch managers and, 14 or 16 service supervisors. And so, for their meetings, they were used to coming into these branches, having a meeting, right, in person. Well, now a lot of us had to evolve to be remote. And so, I think the biggest challenge, not only for leadership, but for anybody, is communication, right? Communication is key to success. And so as a manager, they've had to step up and, take that communication to the next level, right? Because they might not be able to do it in person. Now they're having to do it via email, messaging, invites, remote meetings, all that stuff. And so I just think that for me, I think communication is going to be that huge key to success.
And Adam, your voice is a little soft. I don't know if there's a way to get a little bit closer or not, but I just want to make sure that everyone can hear, kind of get all the nuggets that you're dropping out there. Tina,
Sorry,
go
ahead.
Much better. I can hear you much clearer now. Tina, I'll go to you next. Leadership. What has changed? What is sort of the state of leadership the way you see it today?
Well, certainly since COVID started, I've seen an awful lot of focus, like a shift towards this focus on mental health. and people's more emotional well-being. And it's interesting because that's always been there. We've always had to focus on people's emotional well-being and mental health because that's when people perform. But what I've seen is as people, and Adam said this, as people have moved away from their offices and their office space, what I've seen is a lot of unhealthy cultures have been exposed. They haven't been created by this, but they've been exposed by this. So leaders are really having to rally and focus more on emotional well-being and really engaging people on a much more deep emotional level. And I was saying to Courtney before we started that I think we kind of started to move away from this ability to feel. And we were so focused. Logic is important. I'm not saying it isn't. It's very important. Logic and data, extremely important, not in the absence of emotion and feeling, because at the end of the day, we are emotional creatures and we act on our emotions. And COVID has really highlighted that. So a lot of the companies I've been working with and the organizations I've worked with are really focused on, where did this culture come from? Well, it was always there. It's just COVID has exposed it. So leaders are really having to step up. And as Adam said, really increase communication, find other ways of connecting with people, finding other ways of finding out how people are feeling. It's just not as easy as it is when you can pop down the hallway and have a coffee, like you're managing globally, same situation.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to ask everyone who's listening in online or joining us remotely, this ability to feel and this importance of emotion in the workplace, kind of asking a yes or no question here. Do you feel that same thing, that there is more emotional awareness in the workplace? And yes, I do, or no, I don't. I'd be kind of curious to hear. Courtney, how about yourself? Leadership. We've gone through some challenging times. How has leadership changed, and how do you see it now?
So I definitely agree with Tina and Adam on that with the communication. And I think empathy is a really big thing that everyone needs to be focusing on, especially this day and age where it is remote. And a lot of people are dealing with kind of an increase in spike in COVID right now. And I think one of the things that people kind of take for granted is you look at this data that you might have and you take it as gospel, rather than really interpreting the data and understanding, were they not as productive because maybe their kid is at home sick with COVID, or they're worried about their parent who might be in a nursing home being exposed. So having that empathy and really being able to understand your team and understand what motivates them and what they need from you as a leader, I think is definitely something that has changed. And it's something that's really important that we focus on our company too. And I've seen it across the industry. I think the pest control industry in general does a really great job of trying to empathize with all of their teammates. But that really, to me, stands out, especially now, because unfortunately, COVID is still existent and it's still going on, and we're still dealing with the implications of this. And the mental health component is huge right now.
So there's a word you said in there, empathy, which I've spent a lot of time taking and spent a lot more time around distinction and discernment, right, of words and starting to understand those words again. And there's two words that keep coming up is this idea of empathy and compassion. And let me tell you how I understand the two words, and I'd love to hear from you all what that means to you. If you agree, disagree, and that's perfectly fine either way. Empathy is an internal understanding of what is happening for someone, right? You can't give someone empathy; they have to receive empathy, right? Is the way I think of it. And compassion is, all right, I start to understand, as you're saying, as their situation has changed because of COVID. They have an ailing uncle or an ailing mother, child, whatever the case may be, right? Special school situation. That is the empathy, is understanding that. The compassion is when you start to take action on that empathy, and that's the outward action against that empathy. Is that a fair way of understanding empathy and compassion? Do you all see it the same way, slightly different?
Yeah, no, for sure. I was just going to add in, I was thinking about this while Courtney was talking about COVID and how COVID's, going on right now. And I'm trying to get all of my team to kind of get in their mind that COVID's not going anywhere, right? It's here for the rest of our lives. It's like the new, smallpox. It's the new something. And so it's here. We have to evolve. We have to pivot, And like you're right, the compassion and the empathy, to me, those are kind of synonyms for each other, because you're not going to have empathy unless you've been through something before in your life. And as we get older, we all have those life scenarios that help us be more empathetic and compassionate.
Courtney, Tina?
I would agree completely. I agree with your definitions as well. I think empathy is the ability to not necessarily feel what other people are feeling, but certainly to have an element of a really strong understanding of what it's an internal thing, as you said. And compassion definitely is what you do about it. And one of the phrases that always springs to mind for me, and someone always, I think it was one of my bosses used to say this to me: you never say to somebody, "Let me know how I can help," because nobody ever does. And it's true, right? Let me know how I can help. Well, I'm not going to say anything. But if you say to somebody, "How can I help?" that's true compassion, because that requires an answer. And they may say there's nothing you can do right now, but at least you've said, "How can I help?" It's a much more open question.
Tina, I think you may have just given me a marriage tip right there.
Anytime.
This is, gosh, you're going to get so much out of this session. It's not just
Right.
about business.
Or like, how can I support you, right? What can I do
Yeah.
to support you through this process? Because I mean, I've been going through marriage counseling for years, and it's just so critical now that you bring it up.
Yeah. Joseph Perez, hey, I know you put a comment in a little earlier, and thank you so much, Joseph, for chiming in. I had an opportunity to talk to Joseph. He's a data visualization expert extraordinaire, just a genius in his own right. Thank you so much for joining in, Joseph, for chiming in. Courtney, any thoughts on the topic yourself? Or if not, I'd like to kind of start to see if we can exercise some of this leadership.
Yeah, I echo what Tina and Adam said. And I just think that it's really important that we as leaders really understand how important both empathy and compassion are to a successful business and to creating a really great culture where people want to stay and come to work.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a quote or a phrase that I like to use all the time. It's that if I can pay for people's minds, but if I get their hearts, I win, and so do they. Right? Gosh, if we can get people to
I gotta do it
desire
right.
to
I'm
walk,
trying to do it
come to
right.
work. What's that?
I was trying to do the heart thing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I don't even know. Just
Yeah.
however you do that, right? But if you can get people who can't wait to get out of bed to come to work, gosh, that's a win on so many levels. On so many levels. I think that's a great segue because I will tell you I am not the smartest, sharpest knife in the drawer. And when I went to school, lots of times I had to be told again and again and again before something finally sunk in. And what I was hoping with this episode, what we would do is we would actually start to not only talk about this leadership and this how we can change leadership and go down that path of more effective leadership, but let's give some real examples. And the way I'm going to do that for anybody who's listening in is we've got some graphs of real people. I've changed the names, but graphs of real people and how they're showing up in an organization. So you can start to compare and contrast how these people are showing up, but how you can start to maybe empathize and maybe even see how you can be compassionate as a leader of those people. Shall we go ahead and switch over to looking at some of these graphs? You guys on board with that?
Mm-hmm.
Good.
All right. And I would love anybody who's listening in, chime in. Tell us what you're hearing, what you're liking, or otherwise. Can you all see my screen? Like,
It's flickering, but yes.
Yeah.
I'm
It was
not
flickering
sure.
for me as well.
How's that?
There we go.
Much
That's
better.
good.
All
There
right.
you go. You got the right
So
pictures.
that's right. We got the right pictures this time. Gosh. Yeah. So Tina, Adam, Courtney, what I'm going to do now is show you all a couple of graphs of some people, and I'll walk you through them so we all have a chance to understand them a little more. So here's what we've done. We've taken a lot of people are familiar with metrics and KPIs or key performance indicators of companies. But the hard part is really starting to understand the story of all your employees or all the people in your company and how they're actually showing up for the role. Another quote that I use or I like to think about all the time to challenge myself is my perception is my reality, but reality is not my perception. Just because I think it's the case is not actually the truth. So by taking cold, hard facts, right, the data, what have they actually done? And let's chart that out. You start to see the story. And I think as we start to look at different employees, you'll start to see how these stories start to play out, how you can support them. Let me take you through a quick orientation of these graphs, just so you can understand what's happening. So this is Chris over the course of about a 9-month period. And these are some KPIs that we've measured. Now, the graph is a circle. If that blue area is actually how Chris is performing in that role. Best case scenario, the most effective version of Chris is completely blue. It's all blue, and the whole circle is blue. The fact of the matter is, there are some areas that Chris is fantastic, in some places where he or she needs some support. So you'll see a couple of different lines. The outside is a 100% performer. This green dotted line here is an 80th percentile. So I would say a solid B or better. There's a dotted gray line here in the middle. This is how the average, when I remember all my tests, I was always waiting for the bell curve and the adjustment on the bell curve, because that was me, the dotted line in the middle there. I waited for the teacher to add another 20 points to my score so I could actually pass. and this red dotted line in the middle is what I'll call low effectiveness. That's they need a lot of support in that role. So we've got stops made, how many times they're visiting their customers, going out and seeing customers. You can say in this case, Chris is actually very low in that regard. But their average distance between stops and the route that they're following to visit their customers is actually quite good. Their stops per day, better than average, not the highest perform, but better than average. And their vehicle workday hours, how many hours out of the day they're actually doing work as opposed to driving, because this happens to be a service business that uses vehicles. I want to stop as opposed to going through all of the stuff, because we've got safe braking, safe acceleration. The idea is, as you get further and further to the edges of the graph, that's the more desirable behavior. There's some stories that start to come out with Chris here. Tina, Adam, Courtney, what are you all seeing? What pops into mind? What kind of sense or feeling do you get by looking at Chris here?
When I first saw this, I had to wonder, does this young lady, I mean, she's a year in, so she's still fairly new. Does she have this like enormous rural territory somewhere? The fact that, and have maybe one or two customers that she spends an awful lot of time with. And, I just have to wonder what's going on here. And, as a caveat for me, have not come from the manufacturing industry. I was joking with Vinay. I'm like, people actually measure these things? So, yes, they do. So, looking at this, I really have to wonder, where is she spending her time? What is she prioritizing? What does she think is important? And these are the kinds of questions I would really start to ask her, because I think data are amazing and I love data. What data always do for me, though, is and rightly so, it makes me ask more questions. So I never just take the data as a fait accompli. It's more, okay, what questions do I need to ask? And what I love about this is you start to see where you need to ask the questions and what kinds of questions you might want to ask this young lady.
And yeah, let me give a little bit of context. This happens to be drawn from a pest control company that actually has many, many different locations. And we pulled all of these from one particular branch. So what that allows you to do is, if you will, this little dotted line here is a definition of the culture that exists in that branch. That is what everyone in that company is, the organization, that particular unit, that's what they're doing. You can start to look at different branches within companies across the whole company. You can start to find out, what is that actual culture in terms of data? What is everyone actually driving towards? Courtney, Adam, what do you all
I
see?
do think, kind of piggybacking on what Tina said, not only, am I questioning the actual stops made by Chris, I'm worried or concerned about maybe the company as a whole, because on average, that company is not even close to that 80% benchmark. So what's going on there? Is the territory too spread out? Do they not have a strong sales team? Do they need to increase their marketing? So the data is not just telling you a single thing about Chris. It's also giving you a story about the entire company and where the company falls in line too. So perhaps if we're looking at hers and then we're comparing it to someone else, she might be doing just okay based on the company itself, but really the company needs to focus more on strategizing how to grow group density, for example.
Adam, how about yourself?
I would agree with both Tina and Courtney. I mean, I kind of look at this and look at like this from a training perspective, right? Or were they lacking on training? So this would kind of make me venture into that aspect. And then, from a quality assurance perspective, if this were an interactive graph, I would want to know more about, kind of like Tina said, is this a rural area, right? I mean, I'm in California where we have techs that are in San Francisco, and then we have techs that are in Yuba City where there's, it's a residential versus like a packed city, and I'm sure a lot of pest control companies have that as well. And so, based on that territory, but I really agree with what Courtney said. I mean, a lot of these aren't even touching the average of the company's not even touching that benchmark. So, what would be the historic, thing of the company, back and forth, and then, how do we get to that 80%?
So two things I want to mention here. Number one is there's always this tension between employee productivity and good decision making as a leader, right? And it's really, really difficult to gauge, is the problem over here, or is the problem over here? Is it somewhere in the middle? Because it's a gigantic continuum. And I think what I'm hearing from you is there's a couple of insights here into that, right? So if it is a rural route, well, that's fine. They're spending a lot of time driving to get to the next visit. Well, you can't use the measuring stick of someone who's in downtown San Francisco with someone who's out in Yuba City, because they're two different measuring sticks, or at least that shouldn't be the measuring stick by which you compare them. Is that what I'm hearing from you all?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And also if you're taking a company average and you've got all these different scenarios, is it really a true average? You know what I mean? You almost need to have different, we need to have like commercial average, residential average, we need to have termite average. Like there's all these different things that play into these different scenarios.
And I think what you're saying there is now it allows you to pull that apart and start to ask the better question. Am I comparing Chris with the wrong people, right? Is there the wrong measuring stick by which I'm comparing him or her to? Is that right?
Am I comparing apples to apples? Yes.
That's right. So talk to me about, the whole purpose of this show is about this idea, the path to effective leadership. So give me a sense here, just by looking at Chris. I would like to hear from each one of you. What would you do in terms of leadership? What is the question that you'd start to ask yourself as a leader, and what action would you take on it based on being able to see this stuff?
Well, I'll start. I already said I would have a chat with her, because I would want to know what was going on, even though, and Courtney's absolutely right, the company average isn't great, but she's below that in some things. And obviously that actual stops is a bit concerning, because that's the time she spends with her customers. So I would, in the absence of knowing what her territory is it huge, is it rural, whatever it is, but I would really want to know what she's prioritizing. Like, where's she what is she putting her priority on? What does she understand her expectations to be? So I would ask her those kinds of questions, because maybe she is understanding that her priorities are something else, or the expectations aren't quite what they are. And sometimes when people perform like this, or many other ways where they're just not meeting the standard that's been set for them, it's often that it hasn't been communicated properly, they didn't understand it clearly, something shifted and they weren't aware of it because they're just head down doing their work. So I'd really want to understand from her what she's prioritizing, what is she focused on, and what does she understand her expectations to be, before I launched into what I would do about it.
So look, having conversations with employees about performance is a very tricky subject sometimes. You got to walk on your tippy toes sometimes. Courtney, Adam, based on the fact that you've got some objective, potentially unbiased information here, how do you lean into that conversation to kind of lead them to that? I always talk about this idea of invitational leadership. I want to invite you to a better place. How would you all launch into that conversation to draw that performance higher?
Courtney, you can go first if you want.
Oh, thanks. First of all, I think, if you have a culture that's really open and honest, you just kind of come out of the gate presenting some of this information to them and ask, why is this happening, and where do you feel like you need some more support? Because maybe they need some more training, or maybe that they're not comfortable with the route that they're doing. If they don't have a lot of experience, say in restaurants, and that's what Chris is doing, maybe some of these numbers are kind of skewed because she's not comfortable with what she's doing. So she's either rushing through it, or she doesn't know what to do. So where can we as leaders support her, and how can we involve our other leadership members? And maybe she needs a mentor. I mean, she's only been there for a year, and everything I know about pest control is I'm still learning, and I've been in the industry for many, many years. There's always something new coming out. So how can we better support her, only being a year into the industry?
Yep,
Adam?
I agree. I agree with Tina and Courtney. You know, even to back up what Courtney's saying, number one for me, I look at the training opportunities. I mean, we do a weekly safety topic, and then we even do within that curriculums of like safe driving, safe braking. You know, being aware of the weather, checking the weather out before you go out for the day, checking the AQI, the air quality index. You know, doing all these various aspects, and all the way to training of we do monthly CEU trainings. You know, I just had a guy. David Martinez with California Highway Patrol, he did an entire presentation for our company on safe driving. And it was just really cool to hear all of his stories about what he sees on a daily basis, you know,
Yeah.
and so that was just a great opportunity. And then, you know, to kind of back up even what Tina and Courtney said, for me, before I would go to Chris, I would do some quality assurance, right? I would go dig into work orders. I would see how she's doing, what she's doing, how long she's at the stop, what product she's applying, you know, how long it's taking her to apply it. You just, all those different scenarios within the work orders, because it's nice to be educated on what exactly she's doing before I go to her to try to give her that support. Because I could even potentially go to her with an action plan to help support her before I even talk to her about it.
We touched on this idea earlier about, I think it may have been you, Tina, who said this emotional well-being in our as leaders, our ability to feel. Um, give me a sense of what you think. How is Chris feeling in this role right now? Because when people come in, we want. Someone told me a long time ago. My soccer coach used to tell me, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. When we have people coming in the door, we want them to get to a perfect practice, and so they can do that again and again and again. Because if you practice what is imperfect, well, that's all you get is imperfect more often. How is Chris feeling here? So that, I mean, I'm just kind of curious. How do you think Chris is feeling here? Because we want to get her to that perfect level of practice. What are your thoughts?
She could be feeling a little bit frustrated. And I mean, maybe she's doing a fantastic job. She could be feeling frustrated. It's so hard to know. But at least you can go in there and sit with her and ask questions and understand from her perspective what she's going through. And one of the things I've always liked about data is the fact, and I mentioned this earlier, is the fact that it raises the right questions to ask. It kind of points you in the right direction, that you don't bark up the wrong tree and you don't make assumptions. I think it's really important not to make assumptions from data and just use it to inform what you say and how you address that person. But she could well be feeling a little bit frustrated right now. And so and the company isn't performing great according to this. So maybe she's a bit restless, maybe she's frustrated. So I'd really want to understand how she feels in respect to the work that she is doing. Because I would hate for, she's a good employee, she's been there for a year. And as Courtney and Adam said, maybe it's just support and she'll suddenly turn the corner and start performing a whole lot better. But without understanding where she's at right now, it's really hard to give her the right support. But I think she may be feeling a little bit frustrated.
Adam, Courtney, is that the word that you would come up with as well? Frustrated? Is that what you're seeing?
I think maybe also could be potentially underutilized. So if she is, her actual stops made are obviously very low and she's not spending a ton of hours actually working. So maybe she wants more of a route. Maybe she's driving all over the place and would like some support in that way, build up her route density type of thing. So if she's really committed to it and she's excited about it, I can see the frustration, as Tina said, that could happen if she's not feeling valued and if she's looking to do more or looking for opportunities to grow within the company. When you're looking at data like this, you're not as inclined to make that suggestion to have her move up the ranks. Whereas if she had a better route or they had a sales team that was going to build that area, or maybe she was interested in doing that too, she'd have the opportunity to be a little bit more productive.
So, can I chime in real quick?
Please.
So, my first response is I'm not really necessarily a fan of the whole, I think you mentioned perfect practice or whatever, kind of like this perfect thing. For me with pest control, because I'm an entomologist and I love bugs and I've been in the industry 23 years, I think with pest control, there's this idea of you have to find the source, right? You have to find the root of the issue of the pest problem. And so, I mean, I don't know if you've seen, there's a TikTok video that came out where a guy used Avion cockroach gel, right, by Syngenta that he bought off Amazon, and he applied it himself, and it's of all these cockroaches dying, right? I mean, the worst part about the whole video was that he just took the pin and he just goes, and he just like pops it all out everywhere, right? Where we all know that he just needed to put out a few dabs and it would have been just as effective. So, I think that for me, the big thing is like, there's this perfect, safe, application, right? And the proper amount of the application. But to get back to Chris and kind of like, is she frustrated? Maybe Chris just is one of those people that just does her job and just goes day to day. I mean, we need those people that work at McDonald's and can give us our food in the drive-thru, right? I don't say that disrespectfully. There's some people that just go through the daily grind, and there's some people that want to move up that level.
That's right. It's a fair point. I want to switch to another one because and for those who are listening online,
Excuse me.
I'm hoping you had the chance to kind of see a little bit of the story that's evolving here with Chris. I want to go to another person, so you can kind of see the compare and contrast here, and I'd love to hear how you all see that compared to Chris. So here's Mel. Different person. You can see the graph is different. What did you, Tina, Courtney, Adam? What did you all see here? Kind of as maybe do a little bit of compare and contrast as to what was happening with Chris and kind of what's happening here.
This is commercial. He just goes door to door. I'm just kidding. He's just like bam, 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 bam.
I think there's some truth in that, though, Adam. I think he probably does go door to door, but is it because he's only 6 months in and he's trying to get the numbers and he's trying to impress, and maybe he's not using his time as effectively as he could, but he's just like bam, 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 as you say. I think there's a lot of truth in that.
I mean, there's some technicians that are super efficient and, just can roll them out and do the job great. And then, I've worked for Terminix, I've worked for the big companies, and there's some that they struggle.
Courtney, how about yourself?
Courtney, what do you think?
So one of the things that stood out to me right away was the safe braking. Just because we're going through our auto renewal right now, so that's part of my mind. But anything, there's definitely some training that needs to be on the safety side, I think, especially with the company itself seems to be doing pretty well. So it seems to be like concentrated with him more so than anything else, as compared to the previous slide where I was a little suspect on even the average stop made for the entire company was maybe needed to be investigated. But this, it seems more concentrated, especially with the acceleration and the braking. I would be very concerned about that. He's only 6 months in, so maybe he hasn't been exposed to all of the training that he might need, but definitely the implications for a company can be pretty large with that. Your premiums can go up, you're more likely to get into an accident. So I would worry about that part of it. That's what sticks out most to me about this one.
To piggyback on what Courtney's saying, that the safe driving and all that, those accidents can kill a company. I mean, it drives those values, and I mean, it's just not only that, like the claims that can come from it, the litigation. I mean, it can literally like kill a company. So it's so important.
So an important point here is, I mean, we've picked a small subset of data points here, right? And the nice thing is that the beautiful thing is most companies have software, and most of those software has lots of data that's being gathered within it, whether it's forms or CRM, whether it's a work order management, service order management, whatever else, inventory management, all kinds of net promoter scores, customer service. They all collect data, and all of those things can come together here to start to show you the story. I mean, this right here is just relegated to GPS telematics stuff, right? We're only seeing information from one system. There's a whole story that we haven't even touched on in terms of revenue, actual revenue that's being generated, right? Revenue per mile, revenue per hour, production per hour. And what is that customer service score? And where I'm going with that is, as you start to see that and add this data, and gosh, the story becomes so rich in terms of how you can see what that employee or that person needs. Is that the way you see it, Tina?
Yeah, I think it also speaks to what do you as a company want to value? Like, where do you? It's culture, right? So, adding all those other data points that you just suggested, it just enriches that story and really focuses your mind and your sights on, okay, what is it that we want to put emphasis on here, and what do we want to prioritize? And I think it's so interesting listening to Adam and Courtney, who talk about, insurance premiums going up for unsafe driving. It's kind of obvious, but not something I'd ever encountered in my world. But when you say it, I'm like, yes, absolutely. So that would definitely be, a cultural thing that maybe needs to be built into the organization a little more strongly. But I think just building this story and just enriching this story really gives you an idea of what your organization is currently prioritizing and perhaps what you need to shift your priorities to.
So I made an analogy to someone a couple of days ago, and a lot there. So I come from a data background myself, but I say there's two parts of me, right? There's sort of the spiritual side of me, right, the heart-centric Vinay, and then there's the analyst who I've been classically trained as with artificial intelligence, machine learning, all that kind of stuff, right? There's these two parts of me, and I've always thought it was, hey, I'm a heart guy or I'm a data guy. Well, the fact is, it's kind of this. The analogy I made was data is like the bones of the human body, right? The body cannot exist without the bones, but the bones can't exist without the skin and the muscles and all the rest of the flesh and the organs and things, right? They aren't two separate things; they're actually the same thing, right? And by being able to see the story, you need the data to be able to see the story. But once you see the story, you start to see for lack of a better word, the humanity in that individual. And if you can see the humanity in that individual, what the individual needs are, like Mel here, you have kind of a roadmap as to how to support Mel or Chris before to become their own personal superhero. Is that a fair statement? Is that how you all see it as well?
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And going back to what Tina said too, it's not only just prioritizing what you need to fix, but maybe how this looks is exactly how you want your company to be. If you are doing food processing and you're just doing most of your technicians are just doing 1 to 2 big stops each day, then the actual stops made is not that relevant to you because you know that you only have enough time in the day to fit in 2 stops. So if that's what your company wants to do and that's what your focus is on, then this data may actually be telling the story that you want it to tell. And your focus may be on, your work day and how many hours they're working rather than windshield time and anything else. So that's pretty robust data on this one as well. And their idle time is great. So that tells a pretty positive story if you are aware that your company is only doing a couple of jobs per day and you don't need to increase the route density because you're doing exactly what you planned on doing.
So, as a leader myself, having run a couple of different companies, the biggest challenge for me has always been, I've got this vision of where I want to go, but I feel like I'm always going this way, right? And trying to steer that ship around to say, all right, how do I get over here? Talk to me about this idea. So in that path to greater leadership, more effective leadership, it's being able to align with what's actually happening to where you want to go. Talk to me. Is that a challenge? And do you see how there might be a way by understanding what's happening with your individuals and your people?
Yeah,
how you can get there?
I was just going to chime in, Vinay, that basically, we have this data, right, which is great. It tells a lot of information. We can even create an action plan of how to drive the data, right? But if we don't actually follow through with the action plan, then it's pointless, right? And we get complacent and, we get caught up in our daily lives because if you've been in pest control, it's busy, AF. That's the best way to describe it. I mean, all the time, never stops. Everybody's like, oh, it's your off season. I'm like, off season? What's an off season? I'm sorry. We don't have an off season. And so, I think an important key factor in helping to drive the action plan and actually do something with the data is having people that can do quality assurance for you. Quality assurance is huge, and having that person that can go help support that person in the field, right? Kind of like we talked with Chris, looking up information on Chris, going and doing a ride along with Chris. I mean, how many actual, branch managers or supervisors actually do ride alongs with their technicians? It's so important because it helps to create the culture. And then it helps to make them feel like they're supported, right? And so those are 2 key factors that are huge.
I agree. So we're about 15 minutes out from finishing and from our time. And one of the things that I wanted to do is I always like to, going back to my physics class where I love being in the class. I thought I was learning a lot, but I actually had to go home and reflect on that and do something. with it, right? I get leadership lessons from various sources, but then I've got to take it home and do something with it. Give me some ideas, things that are coming to you that as a leader in particular with Mel and now what you've seen with Chris, how do you shift your perspective? How do you do things differently as a result of what you've learned here or what you've seen here? What's going through your mind in terms of how you might shift things in an organization, this organization?
I would, Courtney said something that I think is really important. I would really want to understand what's going on inside this bigger organization. So everybody's performance is different. They're individuals, of course they're different. But what is what's the bigger picture here? Like this, I'm looking at individuals. What's the bigger picture? Now I'm just really curious to know what's going on inside this bigger organization. What's this organization prioritizing? What's important to them? What culture are they trying to drive? Where are they going? What's the strategy? Like it's raising a lot more questions for me. And if I were a leader in this organization, one of the questions I would be asking myself is, are we being clear? Is our strategy clear? Is how people are contributing to that strategy clear? Do they understand the bigger purpose of this organization? I don't know if that's yes or no, but those are questions I would want to ask from looking at some of these individual profiles. And I think Courtney raised a very good point when she said that.
And I think what I'm hearing from this is, all right, so there's probably some frustration as a leader because you're trying to go here. This is actually what's happening, right? Now you have the ability to ask the right question. I want to go from here to here. What do I need to change, right? And how do I build a roadmap to go there? And in this case, we're looking, at the top end of this graph, the average vehicle distance weekly and actual stops made. Some of those things are very low.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I now have a roadmap into what exactly I can change, sort of I call them the knobs, levers, and dials, right? That I can move and shift and turn so that I can actually start to make that shift as an organization where I want to go. I think that's kind of what I heard from you, Tina. Is that right?
Absolutely. That's exactly what you heard from me. Yeah. I mean, you know where you are right now you know where some of the individuals are in the organization. I mean, I'd love to look at these. You could look at these as teams, as groups, as a whole organization. I mean, you could make this much bigger than just an individual person. And I think that would be a fascinating exercise to overlay like the team, the division, the company, whatever, on top of all these individual profiles, and then really see where your company is at. And then ask yourself the question like, okay, are we going in the direction we want to go, or does something here need to shift? And if something needs to shift, exactly what needs to shift? And it really it makes you think bigger as a leader. Having data makes you think bigger and start asking questions that you may not ask if you didn't have the data.
Courtney, Adam, you had this information sitting in front of you on your desk and you're looking at this. Give me one or two things that you would go and do today or try to do differently today as a result of this. How would this influence the way you act?
So I think going back to what Adam said, it really all comes down to training. And we always joke that we base decisions on feelings. It doesn't feel right, or it feels great. It seems like it's going great, but until you have that data to actually back up your feelings, you don't really know what direction to go in. So if I'm looking at this, I am definitely thinking, okay, if my company is not a company that is just doing a couple of stops per day, then we need to really figure out how we're going to help with route density and make that more effective. And I'm going to look at training and, most importantly, understanding your people. So not everyone learns the same way. So what might work for Mel in training may fail spectacularly with Chris. So understanding your people and knowing what motivates them and how they best learn is something that I think would be really important if you're trying to make adjustments based on the data that we're seeing.
And I do want to make a point here. If anybody is interested in these graphs, there's five employee profiles. We've only seen two of them. So Courtney, Tina, and Adam have had the benefit of seeing all of them. If you'd like them, just type in graphs in the comments, and I'll make sure to send them to you, and also get you in touch with Tina, Adam, and Courtney as appropriate, so that you can ask if you have further questions.
And I was just going to add real quick, Vinay, that
please.
It's sad to say, but really a driving factor for a lot of people is incentive, right? I mean, we used to run these contests at the branches pre-COVID where we would meet in person and they would give out awards, let's just say whatever it is, a prize, a TV, a gift card, whatever it might be, for like maybe the person who's got the best safety record, maybe the person who's got the best blah, 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 blah. And so honestly, and I mean, I was raised on incentive-based things. I mean, I remember being little, my parents giving me good, money for good grades, and if I beat a personal time in a sport. So, I think incentivizing people can drive, numbers for you as well. Not
And I
that it's the
think,
right answer. Sorry.
Until
no,
you remove the incentive.
Right.
well, I think another piece that I heard here is kind of coupling some of those things together is the roadmap and that plan of more effectiveness for each individual is not the same, right? And maybe taking some form of these incentives and layering them in the right fashion. I mean, there's a lot to unpack in just that statement there, right? But being able to go to Mel or any of these other employees and saying, hey, look, here's a place where I see that you need some support. Let me give you that support, and here's the carrot that I'd like to put at the end of that stick for you. So now it's not, we don't need to talk to Mel about safe acceleration. He or she is doing really well. We don't need to talk to him about idle time. There's no point they're going to fall asleep in that session because they're already doing it, right? But the safe braking here, for example, might be the place to spend some time with them because they may not have been aware of it, or they don't know how to do it better. They don't realize that it's even being monitored potentially, right?
Yeah, we hired the wrong person that they don't know how to safe brake. They have a license. We hired the wrong person.
There is that too.
Sorry.
It happens.
Let me
So-
teach you how to brake.
So I think what I'm hearing is that there is an opportunity to build a roadmap. Being able to see some of this stuff about your people is a way to build a customized action plan for each one of them to, I call it unlock their greatness, or open up the shirt and show the superhero suit underneath. Is that a fair way to state it?
Absolutely. I think it also
Yeah.
it's a bit of a mirror for managers, isn't it? Looking at this. And that's why I said, I mean, you've got the organizational average in there, but for the team, if you did this for the team, it's a little bit of a mirror for the manager to look at and say, okay, what am I doing? What am I not doing? How can I improve? How can I better support my team? There's so many ways you could use this. It's incredibly rich.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, we've done it at an individual level, we've done it at a team level, we've done it at a leader level, we've done it at a branch level and at company level, right? So now you can start to look at, look, there's a company culture. Then there's, however many branches that you have, being able to find the subculture within each one of them, because, another branch is going to have a slightly different culture. And look, that could be because of the routes you run, the demographic of people that you serve, or the geography, the weather patterns, all kinds of things could shift that. And being able to see how they're different, saying, yeah, that's what I want over there, and that's what I want over here. So not only is a customized plan for the individual, but even the leaders in the branches, right? And being able to pull out stuff apart gives you so much intentionality in being able to
Absolutely.
execute. Is that
Encourages
Vinay?
conversation.
I have a question for you, Vinay. How have you seen this be received, by the company, and how have you seen it be implemented and used? I'm just kind of curious because obviously it should be a tool for success.
Yeah, so it's a good question, right? I'll go back to where I started with the ego has been my biggest challenge, right? Oftentimes when I went in, someone comes in and says, hey, there's a better mousetrap. First thing is the guard goes up and I say, hey, no thanks, I'm fine, right? So oftentimes what happens is just establishing a baseline of what is and saying, what do you believe is your strength, right? And saying, here's what the actual strength is showing up as. People start to scratch their head and start to say, well, how can that be? That doesn't make any sense, because this is what, here's my best employee. I say, well, this is actually based on the numbers, who is the actual best employee. And it actually starts to drop you out of that ego to where you start asking questions, trying to understand how and why things are happening. Look, the average distance between stops here is actually very good for Mel, which is why he or she may be able to do really well compared to others, right? So a lot of times I find for myself, it's all about just dropping out of the ego and kind of looking at and asking better questions. Inquisitiveness is really the friend here. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was just curious. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think where there's real power here is, again, going back to the analogy of the bones versus the body kind of thing. Being able to see the stories and be able to do that digital storytelling for your organization is a really powerful capability to see the bigger picture here. Is that how you all are seeing it?
Absolutely.
I think I just look at it from the perspective of like, branch managers are so busy and inundated as it is, and even the service supervisors are inundated. So I'm like curious to like how much they would actually take the time to dive into this and use it as as a tool for success. That's kind of what I was thinking when I was thinking that question.
I'll talk from a personal point of view. I usually start spending times on things where it's starting to become so much of a pain in the backside that I can't stand it anymore.
Right.
When that frustration level is high, then I start looking for solutions.
Truth.
And usually that's when things start happening, right? Because where you pay attention is where you get results, and when you start paying attention to something, it starts to change. So
Absolutely. I agree.
we've got 5 more minutes. We've spent a lot of time talking through just 2 of these 5, and I'm again more than happy to share these graphs and all the. You have the contact information for everyone, for Courtney, Adam, and Tina, because they're all on LinkedIn through the platform which we're doing it on. Could you all give me 1 or 2 takeaways from all of this? After from the beginning of the hour to where we are right now, what did you distill from this? What kind of thoughts went through your head?
For me personally, I just think it resonates and really emphasizes how important it is for us to observe the data, analyze it, create an action plan, but understand that there are caveats. It is data, and we need to understand our people just as much as we need to understand the data points so we know how to help them in the correct way.
So it's about understanding the story and getting the full picture of the story, the unbiased story, is what I heard there. All right. Tina, how about yourself?
Yeah, I agree with Courtney. I think having this kind of insight into your organization, it really leads you to ask really informed questions. So you know what to ask. And when Adam was saying people are really busy already, potentially this could save them a lot of time, because now they know what they need to focus on rather than trying to do everything. If I just focus on this, I can really move the needle. It's the amount of effort is disproportionate to the positive outcome that you get. And I think that would be my key takeaway. Such a great story and such rich information to have.
And I think distilling that, what I'm hearing there is now it gives you the opportunity to say, what do I really care about, right? And if I find out that I really care about it and it's safe breaking, for example, then I can say, all right, who do I need to pay attention to so I can lift that safe breaking to a place where I'm more comfortable because I'm about to renew my auto policy.
Yeah, I would
so
say,
that I can do that 90 days in advance.
I would agree with everybody. And, what this has made me realize is that, everybody views COVID so negatively, but there's been so many positive things that have come out of COVID. And this is just a perfect example that, you can take a software and you can create efficiency for your company, and that efficiency can help you go to that next level. Because if you're not, evolving and pivoting and moving in that direction, then you're just going to become a dinosaur.
Yeah, that's there's the podcast that all of you have been on is the whole idea of business blind spots exposed. I say as a business owner, I never like to have surprises. I like to always have people around me kind of watching out for that spear coming over the hill that I wasn't watching for, because when that employee doesn't show up, that's a terrible day, right? When they have a conversation with a customer that they could have just said, "Hey, I don't know what to do," and they just picked up the phone and said, "Look, I stepped away for a second. I don't know what's happening here. Can you help?" That's the call that you want, right? As opposed to them having a conversation, you realize that customers on the other side on the other line saying they're not really happy, and that's talking them off that cliff is a completely different thing. And being able to invest in your people and finding out specifically how to invest in your people just gives you real power as a leader. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Well, hey, for all those people who've been listening in, and I hope this has been a good snapshot of how you can start to shift your thinking from, Tina, as you said, to that higher perspective, to lead with more intention, become more effective. But Courtney, Tina, Adam, thank you so much for taking some time and sharing your insights and how you saw things. Thank you for
Thank
the
you
time.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.